Hey folks, and happy Cinco de Mayo. Hope you have your drink. I have my mango margarita here. I have more than one reason to celebrate. Today we got new Star Trek. I am going to do a spoiler-free review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and then I'm going to get into a spoiler breakdown of the episode starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Nathan. I am coming to you solo today to talk about Strange New Worlds. The rest of the folks will join me later on to talk about Picard. But I'm happy to talk to you about this show because it was pretty awesome. The spoiler-free logline for this episode is when one of Pike's officers goes missing while on a secret mission for Starfleet. Pike has to come out of self-imposed exile. He must navigate how to rescue his officer while struggling with what to do with the vision of the future he's been given. As I said, this was a great episode. It was a great beginning to this show. It bodes well for the rest of the season, I think. I wouldn't say that it was the best beginning of any Star Trek show, but it was definitely pretty good. We got highlights from all the cast. We got a highlight, of course, Anson Mount is the top of the call sheet. But Ethan Peck playing Spock, Nurse Chapel played by Jess Bush. We have Christina Chung plays Leon Noonien-Singh. Celia Rose Golden plays Uhura, and Cadet Uhura. And Melissa Nueva plays Erica Ortegas. And I think we also have... I'm missing one person. Oh, Rebecca Romaine plays First Officer number 1. So this show is set up a little bit different than the last few Trek series. It's more episodic, similar to actually Lower Decks. And we have a self-contained story here, but there is an emotional arc that will run through the season, apparently, according to the showrunners. As I said, I think it was a really good start to this show. The show's topic in this episode is a topic that is very familiar to any Star Trek fan, but it also introduces new Star Trek fans to some of the Star Trek terminology. Trying to think of anything else to say that's spoiler free here. I think, like I said, I think that the cast did a really good job. I think the writers did a really good job of highlighting most of the cast. They all got a bit of a highlight in this episode, even though Anson Mount is the main character in this episode. Yeah, that I enjoyed the episode. It actually probably made me enjoy Picard's season finale a little bit better than I would have otherwise. So I think you should definitely go and see it. And without spoiling anything, that's my take on the episode. What I can say now is that I can get into spoiler talk, but if you're enjoying the breakdown, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Or comment down below if you didn't have, or you had some issues, or you had some other observations. We really appreciate it. All right, so spoilers ahead. So I have a few screenshots, and I'm going to go through a couple things that I liked in this episode, the specifics of this episode. Let me see if I can load those up. So we got somewhat of cold open on this episode, and we find ourselves on an alien planet that sees a starship in orbit. And then we cut to, I think it's Montana, where Pike is. And he's still reeling from his experiences on Discovery when he saw his future, as is outlined in the log line. So he saw that he's going to die in about 10 years. So he is trying to come to terms with that realization and also trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life now, if he wants to continue as a captain. That thread goes throughout the entire episode. I appreciate that, and also it informs how he deals with the scenario later on in the episode as well. We also get later on in these scenes a visit from Robert April. So for those of you who are familiar with the animated series, Robert April looks a little bit different here, and depending on who you were, there were some issues with the change, but I think it's an awesome change. This actor is great. I think you can see him now also in the Bel Air reboot. He was also in Arrow. So he tries to get Pike back in the saddle to go after Una, who was a first contact mission. So couple things here. The opening credits also are beautiful. This era of Trek, the graphics are always on point. Really appreciate that. As I said, we get highlights from a lot of the cast, but we start here on Vulcan with Spock and T'Pring. And for those of you who are familiar with the TOS show, this courtship that is beginning here is gonna break down because Spock is always in space. So she proposes to him here, but it's not going to actually work out between the two of them. And you see the seeds of that just in this scene where he's called away in the middle of them celebrating. So a couple other highlights from this episode. Pike has a closeness to Spock. La'an is a new addition to the team as the new security officer, and she's going to be the number one on this mission. And we also get a highlight of Cadet Uhura in this beginning as well. I appreciated, so they have the conversation between Spock and Pike, basically divulging what his issues are. On this mission, I appreciated the highlight of Nurse Chapel, of Dr. Mbinga here as well. And also Uhura later on in the episode when they kidnap some people to get their genetic codes so they could blend in with the populace here. Let me see. So the guy gets free and he's running through the hallway. So this interaction with Uhura is another high watermark for me in this episode. It shows she doesn't get much to say in this episode, but it's indicative of why this is a really good episode because it shows how competent she is and how well prepared she is just for this mission. And she's a cadet, learning all the local customs and specifically chatting him up on local sports events to calm him so that Nurse Chapel can get to the bridge to knock him out. We also get a highlight of the emergency medical transporters in sickbay, which we didn't see in TOS, but we definitely saw in TNG. We saw emergency medical transports, but not a transporter in the sickbay. And apparently there's all kinds of parts of the original TOS ship that we never saw in the show because the show got canceled after the third year, but they, in canon, are going to build some parts of the ship that we never saw before that we hopefully will see in this season or maybe in future seasons. So they rescue Una, infiltrating this facility, and we find out that the reason that these people are developing warp bomb instead of warp travel is because they saw the battle at the battle nearby at the end of season 2 of Discovery. So there were many Klingon ships. There were ships by the ships from the Baul and the Kelpians, all in very near orbit, and they reverse engineered that technology to use against their enemies. So Pike, of course, feels responsible for this, and he wants to fix this, so he goes against General Order 1, which we find out later on in this episode has been changed to the Prime Directive. He goes to the leader and explains the situation and tries to appeal to her, but she makes some rational points here, given that the conflict has been going on for hundreds of years. So he's forced later on in the episode to give one of those classic Star Trek speeches. After debriefing a little bit here with La'an, and her backstory is very interesting. Apparently her entire family were killed by Gorns. Interested to understand more about her later on in the season, especially given that her last name is Noonien-Singh, which is the surname of Khan. But that gives him a bit of motivation to speak to this summit, to speak about some of the past issues on Earth. And I really appreciated their willingness to speak about some of the issues that we're facing here in our world. They even take some imagery here of some recent protests, and he speaks about our American Civil War and then World War III and the destruction that the Earth underwent. So you can see there, it looks like an actual protest sign from recent events. And you can imagine what the recent events were that they took those protest signs from. Again, this is another reason why this episode was very strong, in my opinion. It's getting into the social issues just like Trek has always done since the beginning. And it's wading into those issues very directly. So yeah, this was, all in all, for me, a great episode, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. I'm looking forward to seeing how Pike continues to navigate being the captain while dealing this future of his. He definitely decided to move forward as captain, but this future is looming. We didn't really get much from anyone else in this episode except for La'an, but for what we got from her, I'm really interested to hear or understand more about her, and also interested to see how Spock's relationship is going to progress and also eventually deteriorate. So not anyone else got a big highlight here. It was a self-contained episode, and I'm sure we'll get more highlights from other crew members later on in the season. Like I said, people got their time to shine. Nurse Chapel and Uhura specifically, but I guess we'll get a little bit more from them as we move forward. I think at the end of this episode, we also get a fake out because we hear that the chief engineer hasn't boarded, and we get the chief engineer at the very end. I think his name is Hammer, and he's an Andorian, but a white Andorian who we were introduced to first in Star Trek Enterprise, who live underground. So he's also blind. And we also get the introduction to Kirk, but this is Samuel Kirk. I actually didn't have time to look up whether or not Samuel Kirk is related to James T. Kirk, but I'm not sure if this guy is going to stay around on the bridge or if it was just a fake out by the writers to mess with the audience a little bit. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and I'm looking forward to what they do in the rest of the season. It was really great, and it sets up the potential for this show, which I appreciate. So yeah, that's what I think. But I am interested to hear what you guys think. So please comment down below to join the conversation. Like and subscribe for more content like this. And actually, I will talk to you soon with the rest of the team when we talk about Star Trek Picard. All right, bye guys.